Hi everyone, my name is Nick. I'm one of the co-founders of Nala Earth. And with Nala Earth, we're building a nature intelligence company, allowing companies to manage nature-related risks. And what that means, I'm going to dive into in a minute. But before that, I'd like to explain a bit what the fundamental problem is we are trying to solve. And the most important number that you need to take away from this today is that over half of the world's GDP is depending on an intact natural world. So it is the ecosystem services and the natural resources that we rely on so heavily. This is $55 trillion of value that we depend on nature. So think about the water that we consume for our data centers in order to keep them cool. Think about the soil quality that we need in order to grow wheat, so we have a nice little croissant in the morning. Or think about the pure water we need for manufacturing processes when producing cars or chips. And that in itself is not necessarily a problem, that we depend on nature. The problem emerges if we think about how much nature and biodiversity has declined over the last years. We depend on a system that is being destroyed. And that leads to a lot of financial risk for economies, for companies, and eventually also for us as a society. And I brought a couple of examples here. So based on our data, we estimate that 45% of all data centers across the globe are operating in regions where water is going to run out. This obviously is quite important if you operate a data center, but also if you're planning to build new infrastructure like this. Another one, maybe a bit more relatable to the Finnish people, which I've heard are heavy coffee drinkers. Coffee prices have increased by almost 300% over the last years. And a lot of that price effect was due to nature-related risks in Africa. And these are not incidences that we see only once in a while. It's actually acute risks that are happening on a global scale. So it is about heat strokes or heat waves that are increasing rice prices by 90% in Asia. It is about copper production that is being reduced by 25% because of water stress. Or it is about extreme frost that is leading to price increases from sunflower. And I think it's being clear that these are financial consequences that companies need to manage. And we at Nala, we think, however we decide as a society or as economies to tackle nature loss and climate change as a problem, the consequences are inevitable. So we need to start working on these problems. And one person we work with on a regular basis is a senior buyer at a multinational food company. And this person plays it quite well. She said, not long ago, we negotiated over a few cents. But today, we face regularly 100% price increases. And this is actually where we come in as Nala. So if you think about Nala in three kind of distinct buckets, the first thing we do is we identify short-term and long-term nature-related risks before they materialize. So this is a predictive engine. We want to kind of let procurement people, sustainability people, risk people know which risk they are exposed to before they actually run into the risk. The second thing is, if you know about the risks, you can start reacting to it. So you can mitigate and adapt in order to make your operations more resilient and your value chains more stable. And then the last bit is about insuring against these risks. Because no matter how good we get at managing these risks, there will always be unavoidable risks. So we're also insuring against these risks. And to make this a bit more concrete, I brought a little case study. So what you see here is a time series of a commodity price, or the price evolution of a certain commodity. And in the beginning of the season, the price looks relatively stable. It's in an expected range. And then when we go into the season, we start seeing the Nala intelligence system start seeing certain signals that we are going to expect a supply shock. With that information, we can go to the procurement folks and the risk folks and tell them, hey, in a couple of months' time, you need to be reacting to this problem. So they can start working on a solution. They can source new suppliers, or they lock in early contracts with the suppliers in order to have a stable price. And in this particular instance, we could secure 18% lower costs for the sourcing team. And these are things that we do across industries, actually. So at the moment, we are monitoring over 20,000 assets and regions across the globe on a daily level in order to take these kind of nature risks into actionable insights. So we do this for food producers like Acomo. We also do it for manufacturing companies and chemical companies like BASF, and also for energy companies and the built environment like companies like Uniper. So nature risks are really kind of across the industry really important, and it can have a significant financial impact, which is why we can operate across different sectors. And obviously, in order to kind of look into or kind of come up with nature intelligence at the scale, we need to look at a lot of data, right? So the first layer of data we look at is basically describing the natural world. So we look at geospatial embeddings, which are coming from geospatial foundation models. We look at remote sensing data, obviously. We look at measured data, so environmental data that is measured, and also climate data that is measured. And then finally, we look at weather data and weather forecast. So really everything that is defining nature, we incorporate into one data layer that then helps us to come up with the risk module. So the second step is coming up with the risk module. So essentially, what does that even mean for a business, right? So the first thing we do is the predictive engine, so an early warning system, early warning models, and risk predictions. The second thing is then we look at loss estimation. So we want to know what does it mean for companies if this risk manifests. And then the last one is all about risk response. So what is the next best action for a company to take facing a certain risk? And I kind of put that in a nice, beautiful product. And then sustainability managers, procurement professionals, and risk professionals are using that data on a daily basis to make their operations and their value chains more resilient. And I think resilience is actually a theme that is going to be super, super important for all sorts of companies in the years to come. Because if we know one thing for sure is that the world ahead will be a lot riskier than the world that we knew. And this is partly because nature is changing the rules. And with Nala, we build the system that helps navigate this complexity for companies so they can operate smart when nature shifts. Thank you.